Hey, everyone. Can I just ask a quick question for the meeting before it gets started? And maybe I should wait for everyone to get on, but just so it's easier for me to see who is speaking, could you raise your hand before you speak? And then I'll call you and then you can go ahead. I think it just might make it a little bit more easy for me to decipher who's about to say what, if that would be okay.
Sure.
Chris, did you hear me? Chris Schratt? You're on mute.
Yeah.
Okay, I just said raise your hand prior to speaking, just to make the ease of the meeting
Gotcha.
a little bit easier. Thanks. Hi, Roberta. I just wanted to let you know that we're all going to just raise our hand prior to speaking, just to keep the meeting a little bit more uniform today, because it was difficult to hear everyone last week for me, and I didn't know who was speaking. So I told everyone else already, but you just signed that, so I wanted to let you know. And we are currently live streaming now. Thank you. Jess, do you have the Tyrrell Middle School Pledge of Allegiance? Yes, right? Oh, I see it there.
Yes,
Okay.
I do.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You can tell Walt just got back from vacation. He's got his baseball hat on still.
Let's go Mets. It's about ready to start, guys. Summer is really upon us now.
Okay, so you all know the live stream is active.
Okay, thank you.
Jess, should we start the recording?
We could. I would like to call the July 20th, 2020 special meeting of the Woolgate Board of Education to order. If you would please stand for the pledge and remain standing for a moment of silence for the loss of Pat Padegas at Wakely School.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, the first item on our agenda is the final vote on the dress code and the early dismissal policy. Dr. Gasper?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the board has now discussed these policies once and had an initial vote. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have tonight, but I'll read the resolution first. I have a resolution from Dr. Anthony Gasper, Superintendent of Schools, to the Honorable Board of Education of the Town of Wolcott, making a recommendation to adopt on a final vote revision to Board Policy 4218.23, personnel, certified, non-certified conduct, and dress, as presented.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion? Can I just ask a question? Tony, go ahead. You can go first.
Yeah, I just was wondering if we were going to hold this off for a second vote, because I thought there was some more review going to be done about the dress code and bring it up to date before we did a second vote. That was just brought up recently.
Is this the personnel though only? Is this just personnel?
Personnel, well, it's conduct and dress as presented, unless that's under dress and grooming.
This motion is just the employees, policy, which is separate than the students.
Okay, then I'll hold that off until the next policy.
Okay. Is there any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Dr. Gasper, go on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have another resolution. It's a resolution from Dr. Anthony Gasper, Superintendent of Schools, to the Honorable Board of Education of the Town of Wolcott, making a recommendation to adopt on final vote a revision to Board Policy 5132, students, dress and grooming guidelines as presented.
All right, Madam Chair, at this point, I'd like to make a motion that we table it until further review. There are some things in that policy that need additional review that we didn't discuss. All of the items that we did discuss were fine, but we find that there's a lot of old issues in that policy that have not been reviewed that I believe should be reviewed before we vote on as a final vote.
Can we talk about those now as opposed to tabling it and then bring it forth with the changes? Is that possible? Is anyone?
If everyone has reviewed it and we know what those areas are, I'm not sure it's been reviewed.
Okay, Dr. Gasper, just so you know briefly, and we talked about this earlier today, there are some areas in the 1998 dress code, nothing about the new changes we made, obviously, because we made no changes other than adding PPE. But there are some things in there that are really not consistent with our real dress policy, if you will, in the handbooks and the way students dress currently. There's an area that says there's no t-shirts, and then there's also an area that says short only khaki shorts. And I believe there's one additional area that said, I believe, Tony, you had spotted this.
Yeah, go ahead.
Fine clothing. Go ahead. You could tell it.
Oh, no. Well, it did say it says no t-shirts in one area. Then it says what cannot be on a t-shirt in another area. So that,
which is good. That's important.
Well,
right?
that conflicts. If you don't have t-shirts, you can't have anything on a t-shirt. So are you allowing it, not allowing it, and what's on it? So that's conflicting. It has to be that if t-shirts are allowed, then the only thing is that what's on it has to be restricted. But the other part of it that I saw was it does make a statement about us having a list of clothing stores or whatever that they can go to buy their apparel. And I think that was meant for an original policy a long time ago that we had considered for uniforms. So I don't think that it's applicable anymore. So there's some lines here and there that are mixed in, and I have no problem if anybody just wants to review and approve this right now as is, and then review the policy for a later date for updating, just so that we get the parts that were discussed that are important for the beginning of school with, that are COVID related with masks and whatever in. So I'm amenable to either way. I'm just suggesting tabling to talk about it unless we have all of the issues that we want to address now.
So, Madam Chair, it's up to you whichever way you prefer to attack it. If you think there are a small enough number and simple enough changes to do during the discussion portion of this motion, we can certainly do that right now and then vote as amended. Or the board can choose to table it if it's going to be more work than that.
I believe it's just the areas I saw were those, but I mean, if we would like to just be safe, we could just say now we want to take out the no t-shirts, the khaki, and the where you can buy your clothing. That's the only things I saw. But I mean, we could always vote on it Monday night. I don't think that's a problem. So then that way we have the final revised policy that everyone could take a peek at, and then we vote, and it'll be more reflective of what's in the handbook, because I think the 1998 policy that was really what is reflective of what's going on in the schools, and we didn't change it, and that's the perception right now of the public. Is everyone in agreement with that, or?
That's fine.
Dr. Gasper, can it wait till Monday? Can it wait another week?
Our next regular meeting would actually be 2 weeks from now, I believe.
Okay,
But yeah, I mean, I'm sure the school administrators would prefer to have this sooner than later. If you want to,
then we could do it as amended. We could do it as amended. That's
want to just
fine.
guide me through the policy, I'm happy to mark it up now, and I'm sure Jess can follow along and mark it up as well. I did find the mention of no t-shirts. That's number 2 at the top of the second page of the policy.
And do you see the part, I don't have it right in front of me now, but it says about khaki short, it says pants and shorts, and it mentions khaki. I just think that should be scratched as well, because kids wear jeans and so forth.
Committee, I see number 1, pants, shorts, skirts, skirts can be of any color of dress or docker style.
I don't know if we really call them Docker style now, do we?
Well, I mean, I don't think that it's only Dockers, because they have sweatpants and they have jeans as well. So
in that one, I would recommend just striking the first sentence and saying,
yeah, I agree.
Shorts, skirts, and skirts must be to knee length.
That's better, much better. Yep, agreed. And then Tony, where is that part that said where you could go buy things? Because that's
towards the end. I don't have it in front of me either. I didn't print it all out. I could call it up, but I know it's towards the end. It's like the second or third paragraph before the end.
Hold on, I'm going to pull it up.
I'll try looking at it.
Here we go. Hold on. And I think the writing on the t-shirt is still very important. Obviously, it just, it just shouldn't say no t-shirts. That's all.
Right.
I'm pulling it up now. I didn't see the part.
I see it under financial considerations, letter C. The district shall compile and maintain a list of community agencies, school clothing retailers, organizations, and individuals willing to assist families in need.
That's it.
Okay.
That's it. I mean, I don't know if you want to keep that in there, but I didn't think we would.
Right, because everyone's just buying regular clothing that they already have.
Okay, we can certainly strike letter C there.
Okay, Sean Hughes, go ahead.
Just a quick question. I know, Dr. Gasper, you had referenced the number 2 where it says shirts or blouses. Is it supposed to say skirts or blouses? And if so, isn't that redundant to number 1? And can the language behind that just be moved up to 1 and eliminate the 2 and everything else just get moved up 1?
It does seem as though all of 2 could be stricken.
Agreed. Okay, did anyone else see anything in the policy that contradicted what actual dress code policy is, or no, that was it? Yes, go ahead, Kim.
I'm looking at number 6. It says sweats may be worn to school only on a gym day.
Yeah, that's not the case. That's definitely not the case.
No.
So maybe we should just number 6 completely,
Okay.
because people do wear sweats, including my son daily. Okay, anything else anyone saw? All right, great. So with that, do I have a motion to approve as amended?
Well, let me rescind
Okay, go ahead.
I'll rescind my motion to table. And I'll make the motion to approve as amended.
Second.
Okay, motion by Mr. Gugliotti, second by Mr. Hughes. Is there any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Next is the early dismissal policies. Dr. Gasper?
Well, thank you, board, first for the support on that policy. That'll be very helpful to teachers and administrators as well. Thank you for your support. And next, I have a resolution to adopt a policy on final vote. A resolution from Dr. Anthony Gasper, Superintendent of Schools, to the Honorable Board of Education of the Town of Wolcott, making a recommendation to adopt on final vote a revision to Board Policy 5113.12, students, tardy and release times as presented.
Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Gugliotti. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Leonard. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Next are nominations.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciative of having this special meeting so we could take care of some nominations tonight. I have a resolution from Dr. Anthony Gasper, Superintendent of Schools, to the Honorable Board of Education of the Town of Wolcott, making a recommendation to appoint the following persons as indicated. Jennifer Gursky to the position of Special Education Paraprofessional at Alcott School, effective August 28, 2020. Connor Johnson to the position of Special Education Paraprofessional Teacher at Alcott School, effective August 28, 2020. Kennedy Pavlik to the position of Special Education Paraprofessional at Wakely School, effective August 28, 2020. Patrick Meyer to the position of Evening Custodian at Frisbee School, effective August 3, 2020. Dale Simard to the position of Evening Custodian at Frisbee School, effective August 3, 2020.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion by
Second.
Ms. Mazza, second by Mr. Charette. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Next is the consent agenda. Dr. Gasper?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a resolution from Dr. Anthony Gasper, Superintendent of Schools, to the Honorable Board of Education of the Town of Wolcott, making a recommendation to approve the consent agenda as presented. And tonight we have just one resignation of Catherine Senerth on that consent agenda.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. D'Angelo. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Gugliotti. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Next is review and initial vote on the one-to-one Chromebook policy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As the board is aware, we've had a couple conversations now about the need to move to a true one-to-one policy. The need comes from the need to have students not share Chromebooks during the school day. And we've had some different options for you to look at. So what I think we should do at this point, Madam Chair, is have the board discussion first. If there is an option that the board wishes to put forward, then that would drive the resolution.
I agree. Does anyone want to begin? Kathy Cordone?
After looking over, 1 and 3, which seemed to be the two we were between, I'm inclined to go with 1, mainly because I think 3 is going to be more problematic, trying to get a $25 user fee from everyone. And then you've got the burden on administration and secretaries to try to collect that. And what if some people don't want to pay it? So I think the easier way to go, or should I say the cleaner way to go, would be option 1, but that's my opinion.
Okay, Mr. Gugliotti, you had your hand up as well at the same time almost. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
that's okay. That's good that Kathy was able to bring that up. I'm in the same of the same opinion at this point. I had originally supported option 3 because I do believe that there should be some charges for these Chromebooks, but there was an addition of the liability for total repair or replacement that wasn't included in our first discussion on this. So that was kind of changed the whole demeanor of this option number 3. If it was a $25 fee across the board with no other charges, I would be in favor of that. But if we're going to collect or have to collect still for damages, then I would acquiesce to option number 1. I still firmly believe that you're not going to get that many people that are going to take the insurance, but I would support that option. But I have a little caveat, which I had brought up, that I want to have a review, or would like to have a review of this whole policy and what it costs, or whatever damages, responsibilities, some statistics on this at the end of this coming year. There are in that the policies made a big difference, and I appreciate the work that was put into Tony for those policies, so that we got the 2 policies as written, so we would know what each option of 1 and 3 meant. And since we have a policy to go along with it, it does have a policy that states what happens if those are damaged, or how they get a replacement, or what the consequences are. So I would support option number 1, as long as we get a report at the end of the year as to how many Chromebooks have been damaged, how many people took out the insurance, how many might be damaged, how many kids may fall into the policy category of stipulations about the ability to recoup any payments for those damages that might be done. So along with that, as long as I can be assured that we will get some report at the end of the year, I'll support option number 1.
Thank you, Tony.
Madam Chair, I think that.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was just going to say, I think that by this time next year, we should have, we won't have it immediately at the end of the school year, but by this time next school year, we should be able to provide that data to the board.
That's fine. I'm just looking for a follow-up, not necessarily right at the end of the year, just so that we know going into the year after what the performance of this policy ended up being.
Yep,
Right.
certainly wise.
Is there anyone else who has anything else to add? Mr. McMurray?
Yeah, I didn't, I really didn't see the benefit of number 1. It seems the cost for the optional insurance seems excessive for the value of these Chromebooks. I think we're overvaluing these Chromebooks. Even a 1-year-old Chromebook is not worth $50 a year to insure for anything. So I still, option 3 seems to be the least expensive for the parents and everyone involved. But option 1, I mean, I don't think the decision to make the insurance is going to be is going to cover the issues. And I think the only benefit of this of option 1 is the insurance company. So I'm still opposed to 1 and still for option 3 to pool it and just maintain the Chromebooks internally.
Does anyone else have something to add? Yes, Paul, go ahead.
I agree with Tim. I don't think, quite frankly, that it's manageable or even reportable. I like the idea of getting $25 or $30 a year from each user, and then letting the chips fall where they may. I agree with him that we're overvaluing the value of the laptops. So at this point, I don't think I'd be inclined to support it.
Okay. Anyone else have anything to add? Can I just add something at that? Oh, Kelly, go ahead. Sorry.
It's such a conundrum. I just want to mention that I think at this point, I would go with option number 1, only because I don't really see how we're going to police collecting the $25 from the families, and who's going to be responsible. Our school administrators and staff and secretaries are busy enough. We can't have them hunting down $25 from families. I support option number 1.
And with that said, if there's no one else, I would also like to say that I personally believe that 2,100 students trying to collect $25 from everyone at this time is going to be a lot more difficult than letting the insurance company do it. And it's optional. So if people don't want to pay the insurance, they have a document that they say they're responsible for it. If it's broken, I feel it's much more manageable than trying to chase around 20% of our 2,100 students, which would be about 400 students, try to force everyone to make them pay $25. I'm not in favor of that one either. And I support option 1, where the insurance is optional and families can choose and take the risk that if they break it, they would pay it. And I believe that most families would pay it, but that's just me. Kathy, go ahead.
Okay, I talked to my sister who is a teacher in Cheshire, and they do the insurance, and she was saying that
Optional insurance, is it?
yeah, the optional insurance. And she said if somebody's, Chromebook, had a problem, they tried to fix it in district. They would find a way to try to fix it. I mean, if you broke it, that's a different story. So there were some options there. And I just think that even the $25 fee from every kid, let's say you've got 4 kids, that's $100,
Right.
And that's every year. That's a lot of money. And this
Agreed.
way you have a choice. If your kid is responsible and you feel that they'll take care of it, then you won't have to worry at all about a problem with it that you'd have to pay for. So I think this gives people an option of not having to pay anything if they choose.
Okay. Dr. Gasper, could we do a roll call vote? Because it seems like some people are one way and some people are another way. So if you can read a resolution for option 1, and then if that doesn't pass, we'll move to option 3.
Okay. So I have a resolution from Dr. Anthony Gasper, Superintendent of Schools, to the Honorable Board of Education of the Town of Wolcott, making the recommendation to adopt on initial vote a new board policy for one-to-one Chromebooks as presented as option 1 in the board packet.
Okay,
Jess, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Charette,
Yes.
Mrs. Cordone,
Yes.
Mr. D'Angelo,
No.
Mr. Gugliotti,
Yes.
Mr. Hughes,
Yes.
Miss Leonard,
Yes.
Mrs. Mazza,
Yes.
Mr. McMurray,
No.
and Mrs. Mancini.
Yes. Okay, motion carries.
Yep.
Next is review, discussion, and ratification for the reopening plan. Dr. Gasper, with that, I leave you to present.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As we know, this is a very, very important topic for the board, for our school district, for every student, every child in Wolcott. So if the board will bear with me, I do have a presentation for you. Pardon any technological stumbles as I switch over and show you my screen. What I'd like to do, if it's okay with the board and with you, Madam Chair, is just go all the way through my presentation. I think it's one of those kinds of presentations where, in the very first slide, some people are going to have a question that I think is answered later. So if board members could just do me the favor of jotting down any of their questions, I'll be happy to answer any and all that I can. I also want to preface this presentation by saying there are many, many, many questions that do not yet have answers. So what I'm presenting tonight, for lack of a better term, should be considered a playbook. It's a playbook that is district-wide, and that playbook will have to be implemented at the school level. And for example, one of the things we're going to talk about is school lunch. How we implement school lunch is highly influenced by the architecture of each school building. So we won't be able to answer questions about what will school lunch look like at Alcott School or Frisbee School tonight. We can certainly talk about our initial thoughts, but we've got a few more weeks left of summer to really do that. So with that, I just want to kind of give that overarching caveat, and we will see if I can present my screen to you.
It's starting now.
Great. There we go. Okay, so it's a privilege and certainly an honor to present this to you tonight. And it's an honor because of how much work it represents from a really, really large number of people and a broad variety of people that have contributed to this work tonight. I want to give a special thanks to our Assistant Superintendent, Sean Simpson, who's enjoying time with his family tonight, who certainly put in yeoman's work in helping me organize all of this work. So what we're going to start with is really what is and what is not within our control. That's kind of the beginning of the presentation tonight. So these are the guiding principles coming from the state. And of course, from Commissioner Cardona and Governor Lamont, safeguarding the health and safety of students and staff, allowing all students the opportunity to return to school buildings full-time, monitoring the school, students, staff for potential cancellation in the event of further spread of COVID, and emphasizing equity, access, and support to the students and communities emerging from the disruption that we've had in the spring. An introduction from me, and again, I apologize for the length of this, but I really do think that this introduction from me as superintendent is important. And I know we have many community members listening in tonight. So as you view this presentation, it's really important that the board members, staff, and parents who are listening in, that you understand that the decision to open school for all students was not left up to local boards of education or superintendents. The governor and commissioner have directed that all school districts must open for all students every day. With this understanding, I'm really thankful for the 30 volunteers from our staff and community who will be named below. Their job was to study, understand, and then plan how to accomplish this really difficult task inside of these guidelines that were issued to us. Likewise, we've all heard that there's a possibility of switching to a hybrid schedule where students would attend, in our case of this recommendation, 2 days per week. This would also not be a local decision. This would be guided by state or regional advice in accordance with changes in the data about the spread of COVID-19. Additionally, the requirements such as all students and staff needing to wear face coverings is also not a local decision. We must require this as directed by the guidance documents. And I point this out because it's unfortunate that, some of these things have become quite political in our current society. And I just want people to know that these were not political decisions at the local level. These were part of the directives, part of the guidance coming from the state. So we're sensitive that wearing the masks will be difficult for many, and we'll do everything we can to keep students and staff members comfortable, but we'll have to always be mindful of safety. And of course, from my perspective as superintendent, and some of you board members, I'm sure, share this perspective, the greatest challenge in creating and implementing this plan is the wide spectrum of opinions and fears about COVID-19. I've said to my personal friends and my colleagues many times, I know very, very smart people who aren't afraid of COVID at all. And I know many, many smart people who are very afraid of COVID. And all of their children, for lack of a better term, will be coming to our schools. So to come up with a plan to address that is incredibly difficult. And it's important that the board members and the community members know that neither this plan nor any other in the state would be able to allay all of the possible concerns and fears held by some members of our community. And that's natural and normal. We will give our fullest effort to create a productive and safe atmosphere within the constraints of what this guidance tells us we must do and what we cannot do. I won't name everybody here, but these are the 31 people named on this list here, representing teachers, parents, our paraprofessionals, secretaries, school administrators, and each of their unions, really from all across our district. So 31 people, and note at the bottom, Maura Esposito, Director of Health from the Chesprocott Health District, also played an integral role in advising this plan. So what I want to say to the board is, as your superintendent, I've gained a lot of comfort and confidence from listening to the conversations that these people have had, because what I've listened to is 30 people become experts in the guidance. And that's comforting to me to know that it's not just going to befall one or two experts or just the superintendent. Because of the process we've used, we've got a lot of people who understand the guidelines really well. So I'm thankful for their time, for volunteering their time to help. The START committee used some of the documents you would expect from the Connecticut State Department of Education, the CDC, the Department of Public Health, and the last one is also from the Connecticut State Department of Education. Before I go further, I just want to say, most especially to the parents who are listening in, it's really important that we all do our part. Keeping our schools safe will begin at home each and every morning. Again, I'm thankful to the Chesprocott Health District who organized a thermometer giveaway. We had many, many people take advantage of that. We'll have some extras left at the school buildings for those who need a thermometer who weren't able to get to our giveaway. But checking each and every child before they walk out the door in the morning, for symptoms, including fever, will be the biggest help we can possibly have to keeping our schools safe. What the guidelines say and what we've already begun planning for is if a student becomes sick while at school, that student will have to be separated into a separate room. They call it an isolation room. The student will be supervised, but they'll have to be taken home as soon as possible. And of course, we don't want to put any child through that. So having those symptoms checked each and every morning by parents is of the utmost importance. This is the structure of the whole state plan and therefore our plan. So we were required to construct 3 models: a low risk tier 1 model, a moderate risk tier 2 model, and a high risk tier 3. The details you see here, I'm going to cover on the subsequent slides, but just for a quick overview, low tier 1 is what we talked about a moment ago, the school being open to all kids full-time every day. If experts determine that there is moderate risk, we would move to tier 2, and that's where we would move to a type of hybrid model where kids would attend school on an alternating day basis, basically to cut the school population, the population density, into about half. And tier 3 is if the data continues to trend poorly, schools would be directed to move to a distance learning model. And thanks to lots of hard work and lots of input, we believe we have some important improvements for that should we need it in this school year. So the bulk of my talk tonight is going to be about that tier 1 because it kind of drives the rest of the plan. And also I know that it's what most people are most concerned about. So tier 1, again, more detail on each of these to come, but is in-person learning for all students all day. So what we will be doing is classrooms, the distance between students will be maximized to the greatest extent possible based on the square footage in that classroom. We're going to recommend and really drive students to have frequent hand washing and hand sanitizing. We have frequent reminders and signage for Stop the Spread. Masks and face coverings that cover the mouth and the nose will be required according to the state guidelines. We know that mask breaks will be necessary, and we will do everything we can to give those on a regular basis. We know kids will want to take their masks off from time to time, and we want to help them with that. When and if we can get kids to the required 6 foot of separation. If parents have a concern about a medical reason why a child should not be wearing a mask, that parent will be able to present a note from any licensed medical provider that explains that. Our custodial and maintenance crews will be doing a lot more cleaning and disinfecting of surfaces. We know that specials in the elementary and middle school will be modified. Again, we'll talk more about that later. Cohorting is an idea that we'll be implementing at the elementary and the middle schools, which means kids will not be mixing groups any more than absolutely necessary. Extracurriculars, after school activities, we're waiting for more guidance on that from groups like the CIAC on sports and to know exactly what after school activities and clubs and sports might look like. We'll be asking students not to use their lockers or their cubbies because this would be a way to get kids to congregate, and we don't want that. We'll be encouraging to carry their materials in their backpacks, and we anticipate grading going forward as usual. As required in the state plan, we will have what they call a parallel path. I'll show you later on data that says about 17% of our parents have expressed concern enough that they believe they're going to be keeping their kids home, which is allowable under tiers 1 and 2. We will be providing distance learning for them. We're requesting that parents make this decision based on the marking period. I've answered some emails from parents asking if kids could come in 1 week and not the next. And legally, yes, but we don't think that's a good decision for that child, for the other children in the class, or for the teachers. So if a parent chooses to keep their child home, we're asking that they do so 1 marking period at a time, if at all possible. And distance learning will be both synchronous and asynchronous. I'm not at the point where we can promise it, but we are testing a plan by which students would be able to log into and view the teacher in the classroom. Again, that is still in development, but we are working on that approach as we speak. For the rest of, or the next chunk of the presentation, I'm going to try to take you through what I think is on people's minds and what the school day could look like. So Tier 1 transportation, what do the kids do first on a school day? They get on the bus. So Brenda Johnson, our manager from All Star Transportation, was on our START committee. I'm very thankful that she joined us. The buses will be thoroughly sanitized each day. All of the common touch points, the corners of the seats, the railings, the handles, those will all be sanitized in between each bus run in the morning, meaning between the elementary, the middle, and the high school bus runs, and in the afternoon. All adults and kids must wear face coverings. According to the state guidance, buses will operate at their typical capacity in Tier 1. We know that we've already begun planning for bus arrival and dismissal times to be altered slightly. So, for example, right now, just to use Tyrrell as an example, all of the buses in the morning line up full of kids outside of Tyrrell, and then they dismiss out of the bus all at once and go into the school. We know that we're going to try to avoid that and really tier only 1 or 2 or 3 buses at a time going in so that students can move through the hallway with less congestion and less density. The next is something that I really want to point out. I know that some parents have picked up on this already and they're concerned. And this is where I said to the START committee, it's important that we realize our job is to give our absolute good faith effort. But there are some points at which, and if you study the plan carefully, the state guidance contradicts itself. And in this, it is here. So the bus is considered one cohort but however, all of those students go off to their individual classrooms and begin another cohort at the elementary and the middle school level. That is indeed how the state guidance is phrased. We understand that appears to kind of contradict itself. And we have those same frustrations, but nonetheless, that is what we're directed to implement. For the most part, there may be some small changes, but we anticipate typical bus routes and stops will be used. And of course, parents may still choose to transport their children, and high school kids who have permission to drive to school may still do so. Moving on to getting to school and similarly dismissal from school. We've already begun to investigate having students arrive through more doors than they currently do. And this is one of those examples where the details are still being worked on at the school level, but to reduce congestion, kids will be coming in through more doors than they currently do. For example, I believe the high school is working on 3 arrival doors to spread out any potential congestion. We know arrival and dismissal will take longer and it'll be spread out over more time. And it's important for us to recognize that will have a negative impact on instructional time. We're going to have to allow for more time in the morning for kids to make their way into the classroom, and then more time in the afternoon for kids to make their way to the buses. So as part of complying with these state guidelines, we know that is an impact on learning that we have to plan for. And parents who choose to transport their child will be getting specific instructions about which door they should use or which part of the parking lot they should use. And it's important that parents cooperate with the instructions from each school's principal. The biggest part, of course, is what will the classroom look like? So we're going to make every possible effort to maximize the square footage in each classroom. So all unnecessary furniture, rugs, accessories, they'll either be moved way off to the side and tucked away out of use, or they will be removed from the classroom. And of course, this means our custodians and our maintenance staff have a lot of work to do this summer. As a side note, I've asked the principals to work with each teacher so that the teachers will have a voice in how their new classroom layout looks. To the degree possible, we want to give them a voice in this process. So the principals will be orchestrating that with teachers who wish to come in to take a look at what their classrooms will look like. All student desks will face forward, it is allowable according to the guidelines that 2 students could share a table, but if so, they'll need to be at the opposite ends of the table. Desks will be spaced as far apart as possible within the available square footage of the classroom. And that's emphasized here because there were points of earlier guidance, namely in the summer school guidance, that said students had to be 6 feet apart from each other. It's important to note that requirements of distance have now been removed. There's a recommendation to try to achieve 3 feet of separation, but there is no hard and fast minimum in the state guidelines. So our goal will be to look at all possible square footage in the classroom and spread the student desks out across all of that. We're working, we don't have them in hand, we're working on our supply. We're working to provide teachers with a plexiglass partition at the front of the room. And this is because the guidelines allow that if the teacher is more than 6 feet away from the nearest student, the teacher is allowed to remove his or her mask for direct instruction. In talking with other superintendents the other day, about a third of them were going to go with also the plexiglass partition. And that's certainly an expense for the district, but it's one I'm recommending as an extra layer of safety for our teachers and kids. And we know our teachers make a lot of good use out of small group instruction where they're meeting closely with 2 to 3 or 4 kids. That's going to have to be greatly reduced or eliminated. If we can do it with necessary safety measures, we will. The State Department of Education has promised further guidance on this, hopefully coming soon. Continuing on to what the classroom would look like in Tier 1, reduced or fully restricted sharing of resources like art or music or technology education. It is possible in a class like technology education that tools could be used, but the students and teachers will have to basically sanitize them when they're done working with them. So we're still working on those details. And again, thank you to the board for your support and initial vote on our new Chromebook policy tonight that will allow us to comply with this expectation. The specials, mostly in elementary and middle school, we anticipate will be delivered in the regular classroom. So things like physical education will now have more of a health focus and will be delivered by the PE teacher in the regular classroom. We do anticipate pull out and push in special education services to continue wherever we can make them safe and appropriate. As I mentioned earlier, we do anticipate mask breaks. Different schools, again, have different architecture that will allow us to space out the kids where they can have a mask break. And I know that the principals are already working on and thinking about how they can schedule those. Teaching practices, when you seat kids in this way, teaching practices will need to change. And I know that we have Mrs. Cordone and Ms. Leonard on the board who can especially appreciate this. Strategies like gathering kids on the rug for whole class instruction, reading groups, math groups, partner work across all of our grades, these will all become difficult or almost impossible. And myself as a teacher at heart, that is sad to me. But it is something that we're bound to according to the state guidelines. In our own tests and what we see in our kids' work, we've made so much growth over the past few years, and tools like this, instructional methods like this, have really been a big part of that growth, and our teachers deserve a lot of credit. With kids seated at their desks, spaced, all of these kinds of teaching strategies will become very, very difficult or perhaps impossible. And we won't really know that until we get to work. School meals. I'm not sure why, but I will confess that this has been the one that's been weighing most heavily on me. We have Nicole Maxilon, our food services director, and Wayne Natzel and Todd Benson have been working on this problem and communicating with principals. This is really where each school's architecture comes into play. So what we can say is at the district level, each school will implement more than one of these following practices as permitted by the conditions at each school building. So one possibility is to use extra nearby spaces, such as a gym, to spread students out with more tables and more seating. So the obvious example of that, most of the board members might be familiar with Alcott School. There's a sliding wall that divides the gym and the cafeteria. That will be a great place to implement that strategy. Where we have classroom desks, we'll bring those into the cafeterias rather than using common table seating. We'll increase the number of lunch waves to reduce the total number of students in a single lunch wave. Where necessary, because it is an expense, but where necessary, where we don't have other strategies, we'll use plastic partitions on cafeteria tables where distancing can be more difficult. All of our school kitchens and serving lines will have additional plastic partitions for safety. And unfortunately, with all of these constraints, it means students can expect to see fewer different choices in any particular day on the school lunch menu. That's a quick encapsulation of Tier 1. Tier 2, what we mentioned earlier, hybrid learning. If despite all of every school in Connecticut's efforts and community efforts, if this public health data trends poorly, if the infection rate increases, state officials or region officials may direct us to enter Tier 2. And Tier 2 reduces the total number of students in school on a given day by implementing an alternating schedule. And students would either be assigned to cohort A or cohort B. Siblings, we would make sure that siblings got placed into the same cohort to help those families to ensure that those kids from the same household were going to school on the same day. Part of our survey to parents was, this is not required, but it's a service that we hope to offer to some parents, is if parents in a particular neighborhood are teaming up to address childcare issues, we're asking if they would like to be teamed up with another child from perhaps the neighborhood. We can't guarantee this, but we are going to work on it to see if the two children from the Smith house and the one child from the Jones house need to go to school on the same day so that they can share childcare arrangements. So that's not required. That's extra effort that we're going to put forth in trying to be a service to the community. Again, we can't promise it, but we will work to try to accommodate it. The hybrid basically means that the number of students on a bus will go down to about 50%, and the number of kids in a classroom will go down to about 50%, thereby allowing greater spacing, greater distancing. All of the other protocols that we talked about in Tier 1 continue to apply. So after consultation with parents who were on our START committee and looking at the results from our survey that had nearly 1,400 respondents, we're recommending that this would be the hybrid schedule if necessary. So cohort A would attend school on Monday and Thursday. Cohort B would attend school on Tuesday and Thursday. Wednesday, all students and teachers would work and learn from home on a flex day, similar to Flex Friday that we had in the spring, where we could have some virtual small group instruction and quote, office hours for kids. The benefit of Wednesday, why we've chosen to place it there, is that'll be a chance for us to give our schools a deep cleaning after 2 days of use. So that was strategically placed in the middle of the week, also for the reason of giving our custodial staff a chance to deep clean our buildings after 2 days of use. Tier 3, if the public health data continues to trend even more poorly than in Tier 2, the state or regional directives may be that we need to close our schools as we did back in March. Based on our experiences from the spring and input from parents and teachers and administrators, we think we can make some substantial improvements in the distance learning format. So what we're proposing is a mix of what's called synchronous and asynchronous. So students would experience about 90 minutes per day, 4 days a week, of synchronous learning with their teacher or teachers if it's at the secondary level. During this time, all students and the teachers would log into their Google Meet together to have an online virtual class of direct instruction. Again, approximately 90 minutes a day, 4 days a week. The remainder of that day would be asynchronous, scheduled flexibly, with students working on different assignments and projects. And then Wednesday, as we said, under Tier 2, would remain a flex day for teachers to do small group instruction and virtual office hours. Aside from any of the tiers, 1, 2, or 3, these are additional actions that we've already begun to take and or will take right at the start of the school year. Custodians are going to constantly circulate all of the schools, continually cleaning all of the touch points in the lavatories. The lavatory visits will be structured to minimize any grouping and allow for the cleaning there. The filters on our HVAC systems will all be upgraded. Mr. Natzel can help me later if there's a question, from one standard to a higher standard that it does a better job of capturing particulates. We're going to run our HVAC ventilation system basically 24 hours a day to keep fresh air circulating into our schools. A side note for the board on that, controlling that ventilation during times when the buildings were not occupied has been a way where we've had a lot of energy savings in the past. We always run the ventilation while the buildings are occupied, but we've been saving money for a number of reasons by shutting down that ventilation when the building has not been occupied. So we do anticipate higher energy costs there. To the degree that the fire code will allow, we're going to keep doors propped open so doorknobs do not have to be touched. Secretaries, counselors, other support staff will be provided clear partitions where possible and appropriate. And when students pass in the corridor, principals are already working on ways to keep that as orderly as possible and reduce congestion, reduce the density of people in the hallway. I'm going to go very quickly through the remainder. This full presentation will be online within a couple of days after any changes that the board suggests tonight. The remaining slides are just much more detail about each of those topics. I'm not going to talk as deeply about each of these slides. A slide about face coverings. We know that they must cover the nose and the mouth. One additional note here. As we've had to do in the past, and it'll be especially needed this coming year, if we have extremely hot days, I will be mindful of that and the wearing of the masks, and it may be necessary to either use delayed openings or early dismissals to relieve some of the discomfort that people will have in our very hot buildings with masks in addition to the heat. As I said earlier, we're going to maximize social distancing wherever possible, and that is the standard in the state plan, whether it be in the cafeteria, the classroom, or the hallways. To the greatest extent feasible is a phrase that comes up over and over again in the state guidance, and we will certainly hold to that to the greatest extent feasible. We're going to really help kids remember to wash their hands, and we will have the Stop the Spread signage around our buildings. Our custodians, we know, have a lot of work ahead of them. Mr. Natzel and I have already begun talking about flexing some of the custodial shift times so that we can make sure that we are staffed in a way that we need to be to keep up with the sanitation and the sanitizing, excuse me. And we won't know until we actually begin, but that may also require some overtime for our custodians. We will be tracking that very closely. Lunch protocols, we talked about it earlier. Not every school will do each methodology, but each school will do more than one methodology to reduce the congestion and the density there. Cohorting, we talked about it earlier, keeping kids in a group to the greatest extent possible. Transportation, we know that, again, transportation becomes its own cohort. So students are in a cohort on a bus that is basically as full as it is now, minus the kids of the parents who choose to keep their students at home. And that would go down when we get to tier 2 if 50% of the students are traveling to school on any particular day. Of course, we're going to be very mindful of all of the health practices, as mentioned earlier, including teaching, reminding kids cough etiquette, reminding people to stay home, and if there are any symptoms of anybody in any family, those children should please stay home. It's important to note that we do anticipate latchkey programming continuing. Tracy Fitzmaurice, our latchkey director, has been actively involved in this process. She was a member of the START committee. And not only will she be adhering to these guidelines, but additional guidelines that come from the Office of Early Childhood. And just a reminder here at the end, I won't go over it again, the differences between synchronous learning and asynchronous learning if we get to tier 3, if all children are home. And of course, we want to provide special education services to the greatest extent that we can while still being safe for both our students and our staff members. And now we have, again, I'm not going to read this, but this presentation is finalized and posted within a few days, hopefully, people can review to get a better idea of what do these 3 tiers, mean. Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 mean at our elementary schools, our middle school, and our high school. Very, very similar, but some important differences in each one. I want to thank the principals and the school administrators and the school teachers who put a lot of thought into these specific plans. And I'll leave you with just some of the data, and thanks again to Mr. Simpson for sending out this survey. So this is the 17.4% of people so far, we're still collecting the data, who have expressed enough concern that they do plan on keeping their child home in Tier 1 for the remote learning. And similarly, a survey about transportation. Right now, we think about 53% of our parents will be using the school transportation as normal. So with that, I know that was a long presentation. I want to thank you for your attention, and I'm going to see if I can get back to be with you in the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Gasper. At this point, I'll entertain any questions for Dr. Gasper, any questions that you jotted down, and we can ask them. If you can just go ahead, Paul. Paul was first.
No, I just want to say, Dr. Gasper and Chairman Mancini and all the others, obviously a ton of work has gone into this, and I am in no position to want to or try to pick anything apart. I mean, we're all in a position across the country and across the state and across this town that we don't want to be in as parents, as board members and residents. So, again, obviously a ton of time and effort, and you guys should be commended. Doc, the only question I do have is, early on you made a comment that if for some reason a student with the note from a physician can't wear a mask, you would deal with that. Are you saying that student would still be allowed to be in the general classroom?
That is the guidance, yes. So the guidance says that for students for whom let me just plug in my earbuds here so you don't get echo from my.
I lost you.
We can't hear you. Okay.
Can we hear me now?
Yeah.
Do I sound like a cell phone commercial? I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.
The guidance does say that, yes, for the small amount of children who would have a legitimate medical excuse, they would continue to attend and not be required to wear a mask. That is what the state guidance says.
Okay. Thank you.
Roberta, Leonard, go ahead. You're on mute, Roberta. Okay.
Yeah, I know. I had a couple of questions. Dr. Gasper, you mentioned that the children would be entering different places in the morning, and I'm pretty sure you said it would be the same way in the afternoon. I think we're going to be able to work that out. You're going to have to figure out which personnel is going to monitor that. The other question related to that is, it's been a practice where parents are allowed to come into the office to pick up their children, and I know they go to the security desk now. That's a real big concern because we do have, unfortunately, cases where certain people are not allowed to pick up their children. There's court orders and a lot of other things that, we shouldn't be dealing with, but we do. My question is, are we going to be able to monitor all those things by letting children in and out different doors? That's going to be a real difficult thing to, before they came in one place, they went out one place, and, everybody was aware of that. You think that's going to be really difficult to do?
So what I would envision, and unfortunately, we're still waiting for materials to arrive, but earlier this year, the Board of Education approved our investment in the security vestibules at our 4 remaining schools that don't have them, and an enhancement at the high school that does have one. So for the special pickups, such as you mentioned, I would imagine those would always be done through the security vestibule. We would not be allowing those people to enter the school unnecessarily. So one of the advantages of that vestibule is the security officer is behind the glass and can communicate and talk with the person and even check ID if necessary. And the child can just meet the parent in the vestibule.
Okay, and I just had one quick comment. This might have an upside to it. I'm thinking, and those of us who've been in the classroom, especially with young kids, and we might be eliminating a lot of the flus that are going around. And, when it goes through the whole household and it goes through the whole classroom, and, we're watching out to make sure that we protect them from COVID, but we might be protecting them from some other things. So it might end up that we have a lot less illness going on during the winter months or whatever. I'm interested to see us track the absences and the reasons for the absences. If they're COVID related because parents are nervous about it, that's one thing. But maybe we'll find that, this might have an upside.
That's a nice silver lining.
Well, I try.
Kelly, go ahead, Kelly.
Hi, thanks. And thank you, Dr. Gasper, and everybody who participated. Working in healthcare, I have a real appreciation for everything that you've been trying to come up with. So I appreciate your time and your efforts. I just have a question, actually just one, believe it or not, about the distance learning. Can you just give me the rationale or the background about the 90 minutes for the Google Meet or the teaching live? Where did the 90 minutes come from, and how did you arrive at that?
So it's a very, very practical concern, and it's one in, when we were in distance learning in the spring, I kind of informally polled 3 or 4 teachers that I just happen to have contact with on a more regular basis. Could we do more in that regard? And these are people who I would term workaholics. So their work ethic was not my concern. And they both looked at me, these 2 particular teachers, they both looked at me with fear in their eyes because they were home teaching their own children simultaneously. And we have a lot of younger staff, a lot of staff who have their own children. And that may not sound like a much of a managerial rationale, but I think that's the right balance between getting the most out of our people on behalf of Wolcott kids, so they're not anxious, they're not worried. So when they do those 90 minutes a day, we're getting the best out of them, and Wolcott's kids are getting the best out of them. So that's really where that came from. It's more on the human factor side because we have to remember, once we go to distance learning, probably everybody, at least in the region, if not the whole state, would be going to distance learning, and all of our teachers' own kids would be home with them simultaneously.
Sure. Thank you. I thought that might be the reason, but I just wanted to hear. Thank you for your time.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Gugliotti.
I just would want to say that I certainly endorse the plans that the START team came up with. I know that they spent a lot of time and effort and did a lot of due diligence in order to come up with these plans, and that were constrained by what the state regulations are or the requirements are. I just personally want to make it known that I don't in any way agree with the state's mandate to start school full on with kids and staff in person 5 days a week. I would have liked to have seen it build up to that point, rather than start full bore and then find out if there's anything wrong and then cut back on that. I'd rather have started in tier 2 and go on either way to distance learning or bring it on so that we can find out. But we're obviously not privileged to do that, so we have to go by state mandate. So I think that all of the work that the team did was, a really tough job to do, and came up with a lot of solutions to particular issues that we might have. I do think that there's still a lot of details to consider. I think we're going to find out a lot of issues when this does start, and still going to need a lot of tweaking. I would hope that that's still open for consideration once we get into that. I'm certainly thinking of the number of parents dropping off and where they're going to drop off when buses drop off, and then picking up in those long lines. There already were long lines to begin with. I think you're going to be longer. So I'm sure that there's a lot of details to be worked out. And there's a lot of questions and concerns that I would have that I'm sure that a lot of parents have, and even staff members and administrators at this point. I know we don't have all the answers. We don't, and we're not going to until we find out how this works when school starts. So as long as, I just think there's a lot of work that went into this. A lot of people put all of their efforts into making it work for the vast majority of staff and kids that they possibly can. But we aren't going to know, and we're going to have to just be able to adjust. And as long as we keep that line open, I certainly am supporting the plan that the START team has come up with. And I appreciate all the effort that the 30 people plus have put into this.
Okay, Mr. McMurray?
Yeah, I agree with what everyone said so far, and I think the guidance that was provided was pretty. I don't know. It seemed to be directed. You had a requirement, and then you had guidance, and some of the guidance seemed really good, and some of it seemed like there was no financial constraints to any of this. When in reality, there are significant financial restraints. Is the state have any funding available for things like the no-touch facilities in the bathrooms where you don't have to flush the toilet, you don't have to turn on the sink, you just wave your hand over it? Is there any? I noticed those aren't in the plan, but we're going to do obviously the less expensive options. We can prop a door open, but we're not going to buy the automatic door openers. Is there any funding available to make those other upgrades?
So I would turn that question over to Todd. I know he's been trying to unravel it, and probably unravel is the right word, the kind of tangle of ESSER's funds, FEMA funds, et cetera. Todd, what's the latest update on what we know about what will be reimbursements, or what will be free to the district? What will be just a grant?
Yes, so the ESSER funding we were going to receive about $190,000, but that grant application was due the end of this week, but they put it on hold because there was the discussion of public, non-public funding. What they do there is they list 11 different categories that you could apply for money, budget line items. Some of it is cleaning supplies, distance learning, technology, and then a myriad of things. One category was to keep the schools open. So it's very, very vague, and until we put the application in and get the response back, we really won't know what they're going to cover. There also is FEMA funding that I'm working with the town on that to submit stuff like that. That's more cleaning supplies and PPE and stuff like that. So again, it's sort of very vague what they're going to cover and what they're not going to cover. Stuff like that for the toilets, I'm not sure if that would be considered a reimbursable expense. Again, we would try and put it into the application and see how it turns out.
Would all of the hand sanitizers that we've installed in the classrooms and around the buildings be included in that?
Yeah. We put that in through FEMA, and so we got to see what FEMA is going to cover, and it's sort of a two-step process.
Thanks. Anyone else out there? Oh, Kathy, sorry, I couldn't see you.
Okay, just a couple things. One, the bus situation does concern me a little, because if it was a full bus, which I'm hoping it's not, because people are going to be dropping their kids off rather than putting them on the bus, the kids are going to be pretty close together. Distancing will be difficult. And the second thing is, this is a great plan is within the parameters that we have to function in. And I really feel for the teachers because, as an former elementary teacher, I know how important it is to be able to see facial expressions by the kids, to be able to stand next to a kid as they're working on something to help me. You can't do that. How do you do these things? And I really commend the teachers, trying to adapt to this situation. You can't do everything by computer, my sister was telling me that it would be almost like teaching about a distance learning within the classroom because you're away from them. You might be looking at a computer screen, but you can sort of converse there, but it's not the same as being able to stand by a child and help them with something. So I really, know it's going to be a difficult task for the teachers, and I really commend all their efforts. I'm sure they'll come up with ways to deal with it, but it's going to be difficult, and we all realize that.
Mr. Gugliotti? Oh, are you done, Kathy? I'm sorry, yeah. Were you done?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, Mr. Gugliotti?
Okay, yeah, if I may, because this, and maybe you can tell me if it's not a topic at this point to address, but one of the big concerns I have is early elementary, where we have kids coming in for the first time or new, kindergarten through third grade, especially. Just concerned or wondering how we're going to evaluate those kids, how we're going to be able to, I'll say, determine, what their level of ability is based on this type of learning. As Mrs. Cordone said, they're not going to be as much hands-on as possible. It's going to be more lecturing. And I just really don't want to see kids get a bad start. And
that's an excellent pedagogical question. That's part of the guidance that the State Department has promised us when I referenced small group instruction. You're exactly right, Mr. Gugliotti, in that we need, just like what Kathy was saying, we need that teacher to sit next to that child and listen to the inflection in their voice and look at their eyes and see what word they're struggling with or what shape or what letter they recognize and which one they don't. And under these constraints, that's going to be exceptionally difficult. So two answers that I have to that right now, which neither is a complete answer, is we're waiting for more guidance from the state. Perhaps they'll tell us, yes, this is possible if you have a plastic partition between you or something like that. And my other answer, which isn't complete, but is I do have a lot of confidence. We have a very skilled staff, and I think one or two or three of them are going to figure out how to make the best of this. And then I know our principals are going to do a good job of sharing that knowledge when one or two teachers figures out a way to make this work safely. I've got a lot of confidence in our teachers and our principals to share that with others. It's not going to be easy, and it's definitely not going to be as effective as it would be normally.
Yeah, and I would, it's also, would like to say that I certainly am supportive of all that staff, and I realize that we do have a lot of good staff members, and I'm sure that they want the best out of the kids, and they're going to do the best they possibly can. But I just know that they're restrained, and that was my point, is that they have a lot of restrictions and restraints that I'm sure that they're not going to be used to, and it's going to be difficult for them. And maybe, maybe the thought is, and maybe you already thought about this, and maybe you're going to do it, is have more evaluations done by outside, I don't know how you can do that because we're cohorting, but right. I just, this is just getting well beyond, our, I don't want to say control, but abilities sometimes here. So,
You're correct.
I mean, I guess at this point, I'm just asking for those things to be recognized, not to be answered. So, and I'm sure that you're going to address those, and those are going to be addressed by all those staff members and with their consideration that they have for learning and their professionalism, that they'll do the best they can. That's all we can ask.
Are you done, Mr. Gugliotti? Because Mr. D'Angelo is okay. Mr. D'Angelo.
Dr. Gasper, if we allow kids to tune in live, how would that affect special ed students and confidentiality and HIPAA and things like that. Have we talked about that at all?
Well, again, this is still being tested and vetted, but the model we have in mind right now would basically be just the teacher, him or herself, at the front of the classroom would be the one that's on the video.
Okay.
So we don't envision at this time a video of the full classroom. From time to time, that might be a video like this one where the teacher is on the screen. And other times it might be like what my presentation was. You might hear the teacher's voice, but see the lesson notes or the assignment on the screen. That's what we're envisioning right now. We're definitely, I know there are some school districts that are putting 2 cameras in the classroom, one at the front on the teacher and one at the back on the full classroom. And with that model, I have the same concerns as you about, broadcasting to the world which kids are getting special help or which kids have a particular disability. So at this point, that's our current thinking. And again, we're testing it technologically and we're vetting it to see if it's going to work for us.
Thank you.
Can I just say to Paul's point before I go on to someone else? That said, Dr. Gasper, putting a camera, especially on the classroom for the younger kids, the kids are going to be watching the classroom and not the teacher. So I think that one camera on the teacher while the class is being filmed is probably the better choice, in my opinion, as well. On top of that, Mr. Charette, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to basically echo the support for the opening plans, considering the restrictions and parameters that you guys all had to work with. And thank you for all the work you put into that. And just express that I'm very confident in our district and staff that regardless of what happens, pretty confident that we're going to do the best we can with what we were able to do.
The other thing I'd like to say is that thank you for being 1/3 of all the districts that are considering the plexiglass for the teachers, because I think for kids to learn, that's going to give the teacher more ability to show some of the everything that they need to show while they're teaching. I appreciate you say that because I think that's important as well. Mr. Hughes, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I just want to echo all the board members' support to the START Committee, Dr. Gasper, and your team for all the hard work that you did to put this plan together. I know the state of Connecticut really didn't give you a lot to work with. It's really broad. It's not specific. And I know there was a lot of time and energy put into it. So thank you very much for that. I also want to appreciate, I know there was a lot of public interest in this topic. I know the board is and everyone has been working hard on this. I know there's been some questions addressed regarding classroom sizes and all of that. I know one of the drawbacks of the COVID is as a board, we were focused or we're getting started on focusing about the use of the facilities and the long range plan. And that was really put on the back burner. I think we all agree to the most part. And as a individual board member, I would be a strong proponent as much as possible to complying with the health related guidelines to have as much space as possible, either between the students or the staff. I know that Dr. Gasper, you and the administrators and the teachers are going to do everything that you can within the space that's allotted. But we are limited to what we have. But at the same time, I would appreciate any effort and or any additional details at a later date once they're determined, because I know there's a lot up in the air. And in the business community, the one thing that's being talked about right now is flexibility. We have to be flexible about what's going on because we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. It could spike, it could go down, and I know the numbers are fluctuating for many reasons, but just thank you very much for everything that you've done. It's greatly appreciated.
So, Madam Chair, just one quick note on that, on the issue of class size. Most notably, this comment is about the secondary schools, where kids change classes and where class sizes fluctuates more because of who wants to take French versus Spanish or AP Science, etc. So I know that both Mr. Drury and Mr. Norcross are already looking at the need or possibility of where there might be a larger class where the distances would be more difficult. That class in that period might move to a larger space, such as the library or the lecture hall at the high school or part of an auditorium. So flexibility is a great word for it, and we know that our teachers and our administrators are going to have a lot of it to do whatever they can.
Okay, does anyone else have anything right now? The only other comment that I would like to say, Dr. Gasper, and I would like to get this out to the community, I think that if parents, for some reason or another, choose to travel, I think that somewhere or another, at least a suggestion by the district, that we would like them to quarantine for 14 days if they're traveling to places that we would prefer them not to be.
So I can certainly add that to my communications, really just to be in line with the governor's statements.
Right, exactly. Ms. Mazza, yes?
I think it would be important too, just for someone to stick with the CDC guidelines, as that's where the governor is getting his recommendations from as well. So that number keeps changing. So I think it's important that we have somebody who's really staying on top of that as we go through this together as a community.
Great, thank you. One other thing too for everyone watching, has anyone mentioned at what point the governor will say, right now he says it's tier 1. We have no indication that as the summer goes along or even 2 weeks into it, that he may switch to tier 2 or completely go to tier 3. Has he given any indication of the time frame? No, nothing. Okay.
No, and that's really the most frustrating part for all superintendents and all boards and all school districts is we hope that, for lack of a better way of saying it, we hope that we actually get to execute these plans. We'd rather not have to do any of this and just go back to normal. But, so many people put so much work into this plan because the governor requested 3 separate scenarios. It would have been a much easier task if he could have said, or perhaps like Mr. Gugliotti's statement, okay, folks, we're going to be in tier 2 for the first 6 weeks. And if the numbers meet these standards, then we can go to tier 1. But I have seen no such release of hard data that says what the transition from one tier to another will be, or when, or even how much notice he would give us of changing from a tier 1 to a tier 2. Will he give us a day or a week's notice if we have to change tiers? I haven't seen mention of that yet.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you, and thank you to your team for all that you did. I know I served on the governance committee, but I mean, the teaching and learning and everything that went into the synchronous learning and everything else, it was a tough task, I think. And
so, Madam Chair, would the board entertain a motion to formally ratify the plan?
Yes, I would.
I think so.
Yeah. Yes.
I think we would need to do that again.
And I think it should be commented, though, that there'll be a lot more details worked out as we go along. And the public has said that they'd like to have input here and there. And obviously, we always want to hear people's public comments. Sometimes we have the ability to do something about it. Sometimes, unfortunately, we don't. Our hands could be tied at different things. But, by all means, share your comments via email with the board clerk. And she'll pass that on.
So on that note, Madam Chair, before the board might take action on this, I did just ask Mr. Pagan, and we're ready to go. Part of my release of information to the public will be a new special email address regarding this. It'll be reopen@wolcottps.org. And Mrs. Kenny gets the pleasure of receiving all of those. And what she's going to do is, if it's a facilities question, she'll forward that off to Mr. Natzel. If it's a Frisbee school question, she'll forward that off to Mrs. Murtaugh. So that'll be part of my communications. It's a new email address just for this purpose: reopen, REOPEN @wolcottps.org. And again, I'll formally announce that in the very near future.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Gasper. And with that said, if you'd like to go forth with a resolution.
So a resolution from Dr. Anthony Gasper, Superintendent of Schools, to the Honorable Board of Education of the Town of Wolcott, making the recommendation that the board adopt the school's reopening plan as presented.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
So moved by Ms. Leonard. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Cordone. Is there any additional discussion?
No, I would
All
just like to mention, we talked about a lot of other people. I want to thank my fellow board members as well as Dr. Gasper and Mr. Simpson and everybody else who was highly involved. Because I think, people don't realize that on this end, we have a lot of decisions to make and it affects a lot of people. And we try our very best. I know we have a good group of people and we really put our best foot forward on this whole thing also. And we're trying. So if anybody has any suggestions, we're always open to that. And let's just, say a little prayer that things go along well the opening day. And it's certainly going to be a different opening day than I experienced or Kathy experienced in all our years of teaching. But I'm optimistic about this. I really am optimistic about it. Under the worst circumstances, Wolcott always comes out on top. And I don't think that this is going to be any different.
Okay, any other discussion or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay?
All opposed? Motion carries. And
Thank you all very much for your support.
You're welcome. And with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Mazza, second by Mr. Bugliotti. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you,
Thank you all.
everyone. Have a good
Have a
night.
good night.
Everybody.
Good night, all.
Stay safe.
Bye.